All right, Matt, let's talk about culture and how you build culture. You were at Chipotle at an interesting time where almost the entire leadership changed. Like the executive leadership team, except for one person, completely flipped in the course of a year.
Yeah.
And in doing so, the culture of the organization shifted and you were at the center of it. And so I'm curious, how did you go about working with that team to change the culture from what it was to what the new leadership wanted it to be?
Yeah. I mean, people will write books about that shift at Chipotle. Um, and I mean, it was such a massive shift in those years. And the entire organization from the corporate office moved from Denver to Newport. And I made that move. And it was really, really like going and working for a whole new brand, it felt like. But the the shift, and you say that I was at the center of that. I don't necessarily think I was at the center of that, but me and my team, we were behind the scenes really. And what was cool is we got to kind of launch this new department that fell underneath the people experience team, underneath the HR team, for lack of a better thing to describe it, and reported up into the CHRO, the chief people officer. And really, we had this like media content team that was responsible for being the voice of people experience, of really building out culture and being the voice of culture for an organization that puts culture above all else. Chipotle really prided itself, pre food safety crisis back in the day when we were in Denver, really prided itself on being a mission driven, culture driven organization. And that stayed the same throughout this transition, throughout the leadership transition. And I think a lot of that was attributed to just that foundation that had been built, through being a founder led org, and just having a strong mission to start with. And so that carried on, but the new leadership obviously was taking it in a new direction. And one of the things that was introduced, you talked about changing the culture. Well, the new CEO Scott, he really introduced the kind of the Oz principle way of thinking, the change the culture, change the game way of thinking. And I really like that and really adopted that into our team, into our culture building team that we built, where creating culture was really, really centered around this framework or this structure of focused feedback, focused recognition, and focused storytelling. So that's really the approach that we took when it came to building culture and being the mouthpiece of the people experience at Chipotle, was really embracing focused recognition and focused storytelling through media and content and new delivery channels for media and content, and being focused by being consistent throughout all those channels, and with the different media, with the different stories that we would tell, with the different messages we would put out, being consistent across them and through all those different channels. And again, people kind of looked at us as like the internal media or content team, but I really looked at us as like the culture team and the people who were going to be responsible for being the mouthpiece of people culture and building culture at the brand.
What I love that there's a framework to it, because I think culture is like this nebulous thing. Sometimes it's hard to articulate what it is, but it's feedback, it's stories. Can you make it real for us of like what did you all build? How, like, you have the framework for what you all did. What did it look like day to day? Like, what did employees see that you all created?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the focused part was really centered around some sort of some like I guess some brand basics, which is like we had some content messaging pillars, around here's what is the EVP basically of the organization. It was the employee value proposition of like, if you work at Chipotle, you will work for a mission driven brand. You'll be a part of a mission. You get to get your school paid for. You could come here, and whether you are here for the long haul, short haul, we'll help pay for your education. You could even come here and graduate debt free. You're going to get free food. You're going to have the opportunity to grow within a brand. We have a very clearly defined career path and a career ladder, that you can grow within, and we have ways for that to happen. So we really latched on to these key messaging pillars, That was really the foundation of our employee value proposition. And that's where the focused part came, is that we just put that message on repeat. So whether it was an Instagram post or an internal, weekly video message, or whether it was on the career site or on a story at a conference, they all kind of came back to these key strategic pillars that we wanted to reinforce. And that's what kept it focused in my mind, was kind of just repeating these same things over and over, whether it was like a funny meme on an Instagram page, or whether it was like a 5 minute documentary style story about somebody who got their school paid for. We were focused on these key messages. Yeah.
How did you arrive at the messages? Because I feel like creating an employee value prop and getting crystal clear on why somebody should work for your brand, and then designing your culture around that, really important to do, but really hard to do to create something compelling. What did it look like to figure out that those were the things before you got to actually building the
Yeah.
materials?
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing is, it was it took a while, I feel like, to really latch onto those, especially through this organizational change. But it really came from the top down. The leadership was really invested in this. And our chief people officer, and chief operating officer worked, I think, really well together, and making sure that the employees kind of had this consistent message and had a clear EVP and a clear package of what was being communicated. But it was also, I mean, the whole team, the whole people experience team, the learning and development team, the training team, the HR teams, operations teams were involved in giving feedback into what made Chipotle a special place. There was summits held with like managers to do feedback and listening sessions about what was meaningful to them. And of course, as somebody who saw this transition, um, you know, it was pretty similar to what we had before, right? It wasn't that much of a dramatic change. It was kind of a new spin on it, and I don't even say that as like a criticism, but that's this kind of like, of course it was. Those were things that were already there, but they definitely got more clearly solidified, and I would say they got reinforced. They got more dollars behind them, because the new leadership latched onto them. We're like, these are the things we're going to go in on hardcore, and they got more energy put towards them, making sure that the career path was clearly defined with dollar amounts, making sure that our tuition reimbursement was dialed in, and how that process worked, and having more and more opportunities for that. And so that's really how that foundation was led. And we started with this little like booklet that we created that I really loved. It was a companion guide. There was this old booklet back in the day, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that was made. That was a booklet of Chipotle ingredients. I think it was called What We're Made Of. And it was like a little manifesto of like what Chipotle ingredients were, and like where they came from, and like kind of did this like deep dive into the Chipotle food, and every employee got one. And so we remade that, through this change, and that booklet got remade. But what we decided to do, my team, we wanted to do the same thing for people. And so there was this idea that on the first day of work at Chipotle, you were going to get two booklets handed to you. One was What We're Made Of, which was all about our food, and one was called Who We Are, and it was all about our people. And so the Who We Are booklet kind of became our like Bible, for lack of a better word. It was like the main source of information of like what our benefits were, what our EVP was all about, and kind of broke down those pillars that I mentioned earlier. They were all contained within this little booklet that every single employee would get. And I liked it because it was a booklet you could hold in your hand. Even though I'm digital first, my background's in media and content, this was a really well designed, beautiful booklet that broke down what the people culture was at Chipotle. And by giving people food and people booklets on day one, meant that we were saying these are the two things that matter the most to us. That this is what we're all about, these two things. And so we were able to record it in this book. And then the cool thing is that then from there, that booklet, we kind of branched out into all the different touch points across the employee journey. So we took that same information from the booklet, and we recreated the whole career site. So the whole jobs.chipotle.com, we remade it, and we centered it around those pillars and gave it the same look and feel as that same booklet. So when you came and got handed that booklet, it was almost just like, oh, I've seen this before. If you had been to the career site, it was just like reinforcing something you had already heard. and even in orientation and in different points of that employee journey, we put the same kind of content with the same look and feel, reinforcing those same pillars and that same messaging, and then telling focused stories around those same pillars throughout the journey.
It seems like there's so much effort put into, like, a lot of what you just described was defining it up front of this is what the culture is and making sure everyone's aware. But then you meant that last part, stories. I feel like the difference in culture from companies that really get it is beyond the defining what it is. It's showing that it's real and like bringing it to life. And I feel like you did that in stories. Like, how did you get beyond just saying, this is what we believe and these are the beliefs of the because I think everybody company has those things that they plaster on the wall, but then there's the real culture and how it's lived out, and you were able to bridge the gap between those two things. I think stories is how you describe it, but what did that look like to actually show this is the culture in real life, not just a printed version from the leadership team?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, stories is how it becomes real, as you said. When you it's not just like a talking head of an executive saying, we want every employee to da 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 da. But then all of a sudden you have a story about a real employee who experienced that thing, then it's social proof. It becomes real. And that you're hearing it from somebody who was like your colleague, you're seeing it happen and you believe it. And it goes beyond just a manifesto, and it gives it flesh. So we would have stories about real employees who had got their school paid for and were able to work at Chipotle while they went through college and graduate debt free. We would have stories of employees who started as crew members and became managers and became district leaders and really experienced that career path and had life changing experiences and got to a point in their career that they never would have imagined outside of working for a brand like Chipotle. And a story doesn't have to be a 5 minute video. We also, one of the things that I loved is we launched a people focused social channel called People of Chipotle. And it was kind of meant as, as a recruiting tool. But, I really saw it as a focused storytelling and a focused recognition tool, because everything on that channel, and I can't speak for it now because it's been a while since I've been there, but everything back when we were managing it was centered around those pillars. And it could be a focused story of like, it could be a meme. We love making like memes around like, I can't even, I'm not going to think of one off the top of my head, but like, something funny about getting free food at Chipotle, right? Or you came for the free food, you stayed for the free college. And it was just like a silly little meme, but like employees would love it. And they would be chiming in and they would be reinforcing it. And they would be saying, yeah, absolutely. This is me. This is so me. They'd be sharing it. And that meme is a story. It's a focused story about that's reinforcing our pillars that we were communicating. And so we would have stories in that sense that were relatable to employees because we were kind of speaking the language of social, but also stories of real employees kind of illustrating or creating that social proof that what we were saying we believed, and that what we were saying the culture was like was actually true, and it was being proven through these real life stories and heard from the voice of the actual people.
That's amazing. And I think that's like, when you think about culture, hearing it from the real stories from the people living it is how you bring it to life. Like, I feel like that's culture in a nutshell, is what people actually experience, not what you print, but what they actually experience is the culture of the company. And so all you're doing is just capturing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. And so in reality, when people would say, oh, I just work here because I want to I loved the food first and I just wanted the free food. And we're like, great. That's one of our pillars. You can say that. That's allowed. Like, you don't have to want to become, a team director. You don't want to have to become, a manager. That's all right. You just want to work here because you love the food and you want to get free food, and you have fun while you're working here and you feel like it's a positive environment. Awesome. That's a great story. We want to reinforce the crap out of that. Because that's one of our pillars, is come work here because you love the food. And and just letting the people themselves actually reinforce that. Because if people would say, nobody was saying, oh, I just work here because I need a paycheck, but I actually hate the food. I don't know, maybe a very small percentage of people, but I never heard anybody say that. So I felt like what we were, what we were selling was accurate. It was real.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like to summarize everything you're saying here, it sounds like you started very clearly with what is the culture that we're aiming for to aspire. And in this case, it was a very clear employee value proposition. And then it's how do we tell the stories that reinforce, how do we communicate that this is what we want it to be? And then how do we reinforce that with the real stories from real people and what they really experience and make sure that that's true all along the way. And that's how you define culture, build it, and then sustain it over time.
Yeah. One more thing I would say, I also loved how that social channel and some of the delivery channels became those recognition platforms. Because so many times people are like, even internally, they're like, oh, can we get some sort of like recognition platform? There's like whole companies that do that. But really just putting a photo of somebody, putting a manager photo on Instagram, or doing a 30-second little spotlight on somebody, making it public, and not just making it internal, but actually making it publicly recognizing them, and in a way that they can share with their family and friends. That's a powerful tool. And again, the recognition was focused because it was around company initiatives. It was around the culture pillars that we had. So it was focused recognition. And that builds culture.
Love it. Thanks for talking about it.